The only one is I have one is going to be a live roundup in 2 weeks at the Verde Valley Roundup. You can search that online and get the information and register. Now I'd like to get to our speaker. I'd like to introduce Bill.
Hey everybody, I'm Bill. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Bill.
Good to be in Prescott, and been there many times. Wandered down Whiskey Row and didn't have a drink, which was an exciting adventure. Well, here we are, folks, in the midst of a pandemic, raging forest fires, hurricanes, political insanity, riots in the streets. It is the end of the world. God hates us. So, the only safe place I have is AA. This is a safe place. About 2 months ago, I shut the news off. Took me about a week to detox, and I feel 100% better. So we're all locked down. We're all at home, right? They took our meetings away from us. We're having to put up with this Zoom thing. And it's been an interesting transition. It's been interesting watching the fellowship rise to the occasion. My home group is the Hermosa Beach Men's Stag. It meets on Monday nights at 8:30. It's a real AA meeting. It's on late at night, and it lasts an hour and a half with no breaks. And I've been going there for 35 years. My sobriety date is March the 27th, 1985. So in March, when the shutdown happened, they took our meeting away. I've always gone to meetings. I've never drifted away from AA. I enjoy it. I have fun with it. Even the awful meetings are kind of interesting and entertaining. I've never been bored in Alcoholics Anonymous in 35 years. I've been mistreated frequently. People don't give me the respect I deserve on a regular basis, but I've never been bored. And if you're sitting out there tonight and you're bored, it's because you're boring. It's not us, right? So it's like, and they took our meeting away. They took the meetings away, you know, and this upset me. I didn't like it. One more thing that I'm powerless over. Now they've taken my refuge away from me. What are we going to do? Oh my God, what's going to happen to the newcomer? And all of that. So within a week, when they shut us down, we were on Zoom. The young guys stood up and said, we have the technology, we can do this, let's do this, and we're on Zoom. Fast forward about, 6 months we've been doing this. I think that this thing has given the world more access to Alcoholics Anonymous than it has ever had. It's been absolutely phenomenal. I've been doing more AA than I've done in years, you know. Matter of fact, I'm getting amped out. You know, they can get speakers anywhere they want for nothing, right? And it's like, we're all over the world, man. We're in Russia, we're in Tehran, you know, using interpreters, doing workshops here and there. All your buddies want you to come and hear them talk. All kinds of people that have never spoken before are now speaking now. And the Zoom meetings have just exploded and exponentially. There's some guys in New Zealand that are doing Alcoholics Anonymous 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with a different leader every hour. Can you imagine the logistics of that? I've got guys I'm reading the book with that have gotten sober on Zoom. They've never been to a live meeting. It seems to be working, right? You know, some people are drinking and some people are staying sober, just like it used to be. You know, it's pretty much the same. Now all the introverts can finally go to meetings. All the people that are afraid, they don't like getting in their car and driving all the way down to the club, right? They just want to sit at home. Now these people are doing more meetings now because they can just sit at home and do meetings. I don't think it's going to go away either. I think when we go back live, we're going to end up with a big screen on the end of the room. And people are going to show up. You know, I've been talking about my home group around the world for years and years, and now we have guys showing up on Monday night from South Africa, New Zealand, Australia, parts of Europe, across the United States. You know, it's become an international meeting. Isn't that cool? Isn't that cool? We got so tired of them announcing themselves as out-of-towners that we issued them green cards so they don't have to do that anymore, you know? And So it's been a lot of fun. It's been really interesting. It's absolutely fascinating, you know. But I miss you. I miss sitting with you. I miss touching you. I miss it. I miss it a lot. And someday this will fade away. Someday this will go away. Someday we'll be back in the room together. But anyway, since this thing happened, I've been sitting at home a lot. I'm 73 years old. I had a liver transplant a few years ago. So I'm a prime target to get knocked off by this virus. So I just stay home, man. I don't go anywhere. You know, my brother-in-law comes over and washes my car. I don't drive it anywhere. It's just sitting out in the front rotting, you know. So I just stay home. You know, I walk a lot. I go out and I try to walk 5 to 8 miles a day. I made it today, and trying to stay healthy. But I've been sitting and thinking, and I've come to some conclusions. And I agree with all the conclusions I've come to. And and I try not to clear them with too many people. I don't want to argue about it because I like my conclusions, and I'm going to share some of them with you tonight. And so an interesting thing happened to me in February before the shutdown. The last place I traveled, I flew up to Sonoma to speak at a men's banquet. And this guy picked me up, old guy like me, and been around AA for a long time. I'm riding in the car to go to the event. And he asked me how long I'm sober. And I told him with great pride, I said, well, if I don't drink in your car on the way to this event, I got a good shot at being 35 years sober. And his response to me was, I almost had 30 years. So you knew it was going to be an interesting conversation. And he told the story, you know, being sober a long time, come 29 years and 9 months sober, married to a sober woman he met in AA for a long time, coming up on retirement, life's good, and he's resting on his laurels. Evidently, we have laurels, and we can rest on them. Talks about that in the book. Remember Jim, the car salesman? He failed to improve his spiritual life. And he drank, and he rested on his laurels. Guys rest on their laurels. So I wonder, what are the laurels that we can rest on? And why shouldn't we rest on them? So he had a little surgery, and they gave him some pain medication, and on one day he took 2 pills instead of 1, and that started the downhill slide, and he started drinking again after a while, and it was real shitty. And when he was telling me this story, he was 1.5 years, 2 years sober, and he's back in AA, and he's got a commitment, man. He's driving the speaker around, you know. And it just really got my attention, and it got me thinking, because it was like talking to myself, you know, same guy, and it really got my attention. So it says in our book, I'm starting to write stuff down. I'm thinking about this. It says in the book that the only thing that's going to save us, the only thing that's going to keep us sober, and the entire purpose for the book and the steps in the program, is our spiritual condition and the maintenance of that. That's what it says. So I'm thinking to myself, evidently I need a spiritual condition. Do I have one? If so, how did I get it? What's it made up of? What is it? And more importantly, and above all, how do I maintain it? If I have one, how do I maintain it? And if I don't, will I drink? Will I drink again? So any speaker that tells this story, pretty much any speaker that tells this story, even shares about it in a meeting, he'll usually start off by saying, long before I ever drank, I felt weird, strange, odd, creepy, you know, not part of, didn't know the rules, separate from, outside the circle. The aliens have dropped me off. I'm waiting for the mothership to return, you know, and sometimes they'll talk about this thing that I had alcoholic thinking long before I ever drank, as if there is such a thing, right? And we talk about this feeling of separation and strangeness as part of alcoholism. And we talk a lot about the ism. Even when I'm not drinking, evidently there's supposed to be an ism. And there's an aspect to alcoholism that doesn't have anything to do with drinking. There's some kind of special personality, special weird twist, kind of an interesting, strange, neurotic tendency towards weirdness that is uniquely alcoholic. I don't believe any of that. I think that's absolute bullshit. I don't think that's true at all. I think The ego presents itself at about 2.5 years old. We have a term for that. We call it the terrible twos. Prior to that, the little kid doesn't have any idea that it's separate from anything. Then it realizes that when I cry, they come. So there must be a them. There must be a me and a them, a subject and an object. This is called reality. The job of the ego is to create separation. If we felt connected to everything around us all the time and we couldn't sense any separation, what would be real? So the ego has a purpose, and every human being has one of these. Everyone, right? Everyone. This is a human condition. This feeling of separation that we felt when we were kids, it's a human condition. It's not alcoholism. Every kid feels it. Some a little bit more than others. But all of us here in this room, sitting in a classroom in elementary school, right? We look across the room and we make the determination that I need to look like that kid over there, then I'll be better. If I had long, blonde, beautiful, straight hair like that girl instead of this curly mop on my head, I'd be prettier. People would like me better. If I was more athletic like Jimmy, I'd be cooler. I'd be more in the in crowd. If I dress like these guys over there, then I'll be cool, because those are the cool people. Now, when I was a kid, the cool people to me were the kids behind the backstop smoking cigarettes. I don't know why that is, you know, but I was just attracted to the outlaw element, right? And but all kids feel this. And then we grow up a little bit more and we hit the preteen years. You know, we become 10, 11, and 12. And now it's getting more sophisticated, right? Now we're trying to figure out how to be lovers, how to hook up with the opposite sex, to get close to somebody. The authority figures become more stringent, more overt, and we're trying to deal with, you know, group dynamics. Maybe we're trying to be part of a team or something, or learn some other skills, but it's starting to get really sophisticated now. In those middle school and early high school years, are really sophisticated. Right in the middle of that, that's when alcoholism presents itself. The ism gets us. You know how it gets us? We drink. And we realize that we have a skill set that other people don't have. We get a bang out of it that other people don't get. Now we're standing around with a bunch of other kids and they're experimenting too. This seems to be part of the rite of passage, is experimenting with alcohol, maybe a little drug, smoking a little reefer or something like that, right? But we get carried away with it. You know, the alcoholism strikes us and we don't seem to have any control over how much we consume. And when we're going to do it again, we start obsessing about it, right? Now, some of us are a little bit more than others. Some of us crossed a line, who successfully drank for a while, and there were guys like me that went right down the rabbit hole immediately, you know? And by the time I was 17, I was a bad drunk in high school. I had a big jacket and a slouch and a sneer and a foul mouth and a bad attitude, and I carried a gun. And I'm from the mean streets of Palos Verdes, man. There's no gangs in Palos Verdes. Nobody was looking for me. I was a gang of one, right? But there I was, you know, the gangster element, you know, and I'm getting it loaded and getting high, drinking as much as I can get my hands on it. And as you move up in high school, pretty soon it gets pretty easy. You know, you're hanging around the liquor store and finding the old guy that sleeps in the gas station behind his car behind. You give him some extra money, he'll go get you some booze. You start working it. You start really working on it. You know, you get after it. And I did that. By the time I was 17, I'd already been to jail, right? Alcoholism happens when we drink, right? You know, right in the middle when they're handing out the lessons, when the real lessons are happening, we medicate ourselves. No wonder we have trouble with personal relationships, right? Because we missed all the training. You know? At least I did. I started drinking at 14. I don't think 13, maybe sipped a few beers, but I can kind of remember at 14 and 15, I'm getting hammered. You know, I'm chasing it. I'm really going after it. At 17, man, I was drinking before school, and I barely graduated from high school. I couldn't find college. By the time I was 22, I was in a mental institution. I was running with an outlaw motorcycle gang and sticking needles in my arm. I'd gotten married and had 2 kids. We went up to grow our own in Oregon. It was the 60s, right? And I ended up in a mental institution. They're on welfare, and I'm not coming home to that family, and it was awful. Short party. Short party. I was a surfer and a biker and a tough guy, and I never went to the beach. My motorcycle rarely ran, and I was afraid to fight, but I looked really good. I had a chrome Nazi helmet for a hat and a primary chain for a belt, black greasy Levi's, big black boots with chains around them. I've got tattoos all over me, but I had a clip-on earrings. I didn't want to hurt myself. You know, it's like, that's pretty much all you need to know about me, isn't it? So at 22, mental institution, and I had another 15 years to go. And I walked into Alcoholics Anonymous at 37 years old, went through a 1 month recovery program and walked into AA. I got sober in March of 85. In April, I walked into Alcoholics Anonymous. I walked into a meeting. It was a Friday night meeting at the Hermosa Beach Alano Club. It was called the Gong Show. All the Harleys were parked out front, you know, so it looked right at home right away, right, you know. And everybody's all dressed up trying to hook up. It was a Friday night meeting, and they're hooting and hollering and counting off the steps and hooting people off the podium. It was just it was a mess. And I stood in the back of that room, and I didn't feel part of because I wasn't, right? I didn't know anybody. But by the end of that meeting, I was laughing. And I drove home that night, and I said, this may not be so bad. It was not what I was expecting. Two things happened to me that are just pure luck when I walked into AA. The first one's probably the most important. I just liked it. And I've never lost my enthusiasm for it. It's been varying levels of it, but I've continued to like it the whole time. I find you utterly fascinating. This is the character defect center of the known universe. I'm an old hippie from the 60s, so weird has always attracted me, and you're a very strange crowd of people, you know. You ever tried to dress correctly for AA? It's not possible, you know. It's not possible. There's every kind of human being you could imagine, especially in the big urban areas. And I find that fascinating. I think it's wonderful. You never know who you're sitting next to. It's just, it's strange, and it's really cool. The second thing that happened, after a couple of weeks of banging around, you know, going to meetings and listening to the stories and trying to get my sea legs, I asked this guy to sponsor me. I asked a man to help me, and he actually did, which doesn't always happen, you know. And he said to me, he says, go home and read the doctor's opinion. Make notes in the margin of what you agree with and what you don't. And be at my house Thursday at 5 o'clock, and we'll discuss it. So I went home and I read my assignment, and I showed up at his house Thursday at 5 o'clock, and he did not trust me that I'd read it. And he had me sit there and read it to him out loud. I've done sponsorship workshops around a good part of the world over the years. Rule number one when you're sponsoring somebody is make sure they read the book. Don't trust them. Read it with them. You know, it'll probably help you out. You know? And I've been doing that for 35 years. I've been reading the book with them. Now I'm reading it with them on Zoom. You know, and each week I went to his house and we read another chapter in the book. And we worked the steps. I worked the steps. At 6 months sober, I did a fifth step. And I had an experience. I had one of these spiritual experiences that gets talked about around here a lot. It took me a while to realize what had happened to me. The first one that happened to me, it took me a long time to realize the depth of it. That on March the 27th, 1985, the obsession to drink and use drugs was lifted from me and has never returned. What else do you need to know about the God thing, right? I mean, the word might, you know, if you're having trouble with God, I'm here to tell you that I don't believe in the God that you don't believe in either, right? I mean, we run out of words, so we use this medieval term called God for whatever it might be. But something touched me on March the 27th, 85. Now, I can waste a lot of time trying to apply a concept to it, or I can recognize it for what it is, something other than me. You know, clearly I did not touch myself, although I have done that from time to time. But in this particular case, something touched me, and I got sober. And then at 6 months sober, he told me, when you go home after doing this fifth step, think about the person that walked through the door 6 months ago compared to the guy that walked through the door today. And I did that. I stood there at the front door of my house and I thought about that. And I realized something. I had an experience. It's going to be like this now. My life is going to be like this. Now, I wasn't sure exactly what this was, but I had not had a drink or a drug for 6 whole months. I don't think that happened to me from the time I was 14 years old, and I'm 37 years old at this time. That's pretty remarkable. I mean, sober is a strange experience. Everything's different, right? And I think what I knew, maybe even more than it's going to be like this, that the old life, whatever that old life was, it's over. Whatever that was is done with. Now, this can be a disconcerting experience. Like, what am I going to do now? What am I going to be like now? Well, after 6 months of being around AA, you had kind of a feel for it, right? It's going to be like this. Whatever this is, it's going to be like this. So spiritual condition, right? At 6 months sober, I think I was developing a bit of a spiritual condition because I had a realization that something had shifted. There's a consciousness, right? You're not just wandering around aimlessly, maybe a little less aimlessly. Now you're starting to look at it like, wow, I wonder what this is. I mean, you're reading the book, you're doing intellectual stuff, right? The guy's talking to you, he's trying to explain certain things to you. You're trying to absorb what's in the book and trying to understand it, but there's something else that's going on. There's a transformation that's beginning to occur. So what's the very first thing they hit us with when we walk in here? The very first thing they hit us with is this whole concept, the whole idea of powerlessness. Now, they took it easy on us and they just said that we're powerless over drugs and alcohol because they didn't want us to run screaming down the street, right? It's just this thing, just drugs and alcohol. You can control all the other stuff in your life. Just think about drugs and alcohol. Well, I'm here to report to you that they're bullshitting us. I have yet to find anything that I have any power over at all. It's worse than you think. I mean, everything is completely out of control. And I suffer over that. I have difficulty. The whole human race has trouble with the powerless thing, right? We think we can control the earth. And when it doesn't behave correctly, we get freaked out. We get so freaked out, we pass legislation to stop the earth from changing. You know, well, good luck, you know. I am utterly powerless over everything, and I don't need any power. Everything is unfolding right in front of me all the time. And this whole concept of powerlessness is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. Because even if I think I have power, I don't really. Right? And the sooner I realize that, the easier things are going to get. I mean, we talk about things around here. We talk about acceptance all the time, right? Well, we got to accept things. I'll tell you something. You know where acceptance comes from? You know how you get to accept things? If you really get powerlessness at a gut level, not just an intellectual understanding, but at a visceral or gut level, how powerless you are, acceptance just happens. There's nothing else to do, you know, because I can't change anything. We even have this prayer that says, you know, help me to realize the things I can change and can't change, as if there are things I can change, right? They're leading us to believe that maybe there's hope, that there's some stuff we can change maybe from time to time. I'm having trouble finding what those things are, you know? We look out in nature and we determine that some things are good and some things are bad, right? There's good stuff out there and there's bad stuff. Do you know that that does not exist in nature? Things just are. We add the morality to it. We add the judgment. We add the good and the bad, the right and the wrong. It doesn't exist. It's a fantasy. Things just are. They just are, and we have trouble with that. I have trouble with that. There's some stuff out there that's incorrect, and it needs to be different. And it doesn't change, and I suffer. It's the source of all the suffering in my life, is my inability to accept things just exactly as they are. Doesn't have to like it, but I have to accept it, or else I'm going to suffer. So powerlessness is the first pillar of spiritual condition. Any spiritual path worth its salt teaches this. They all do. All the mystics do, right? Religion will tell us how to behave correctly so that we can get what we want. The mystics, which are beyond the dogma of religion, say, no, no, no. Things just are. It's like they ask the Dalai Lama, you know, what's the ultimate spiritual truth? And he looks at you and very slowly he says, all is well. And you're absorbing that, right? Because you're not buying that. So then he'll pause like he does and say it very slowly, like he's talking to you like you're stupid, you know, all is well. I just have trouble with that. I have faith that's true, but I have trouble with it, you know. So powerlessness is the first pillar of spiritual condition. Just the drugs and alcohol. If I just do the drugs and alcohol stuff, not all this other philosophical stuff, just the drugs and alcohol. And I could cop to that because I was in trouble. I was hurt physically. I was in very bad shape. Almost killed myself. And if I can grasp that powerlessness over the drug, the second step then becomes operational. I need to line myself with the power. I need to be restored to sanity. Something's got to help me, something outside myself, right? Now, do you need a God in order to do this? Some people will tell you, you need to come up with a God of your understanding. Well, I profess to you, no, you don't. You don't have to have a God. You can just reject that entirely. But, you know, it's like, I love the old adage that all you need to know about God is it's not you. Now, I get that. That clearly, it is not me. You know, I can do that. That's called having an open mind, I think. It's like, well, where else am I going to go? Then if I can do that just a little bit, the third step becomes operational. Third step's interesting. They say that we're going to make a decision because we have power, right? We're going to decide to turn our life and will over to clearly what already has it anyway. I think it was nice of them to lead us to believe that we actually have some say in the matter, you know? Kind of gives me that feeling like, well, at least I can participate because I can sit around and argue with you about God. I can't do that. I'll sit with a guy and I'll say, are you ready to do the third step? The guy looks at me, he goes, no. I go, why not? He says, I have a problem with God. I look right at him and I go, me too, let's pray. The air goes out of the argument, right? Then the guy says, well, I don't even believe in God. I look right at him and I tell him, nobody really does, man. We're all just whistling in the dark, hoping for the best. Let's pray. It's like, because you just want to sit around and argue with me about God because you don't want to do the inventory. And the reason you don't want to do the inventory is that's closer to the ninth step and you're never going to pay back the money, right? So I'm not going to sit around and waste a lot of time arguing with you about God. But I can tell you, I'm sitting in front of a room of about how many people we got? 75 people. I bet you at least half of you have a problem with God. Even if you believe in it, you have a problem with it. We all have a problem with it. You know, it doesn't make any good rational sense. So they teach us, well, just have faith, have blind faith. Just throw yourself into, you know, okay, great. Let's try that. Okay. Here's what I believe about God, about the experience in Alcoholics Anonymous. You don't have to, we are dogma creating machines. We need to understand, and understanding is the booby prize. What will happen to you in Alcoholics Anonymous is what has happened to me. You will have the experience of it. It will come and visit you, right? If you stick around and you do some of this stuff, it will show up, and then you can label it with whatever makes you feel comfortable. But you are going to have an experience of it. AA is an experience. God is an experience. It's not a concept. And your ego, the little ego that presented itself at 2.5 years old, that guy, remember him? He's still around now. He's bigger now. The construct of who you think you are is a hell of a lot more sophisticated, right? It doesn't like being in the present moment. But it dearly loves the idea of us having a battle of wills with the power that drives the entire universe. Like, what's the difference between my will and God's will? As if there could be a difference, right? As if we're separate. Here's the old separate thing. And the ego wants to have its own personal relationship with God, preferably one that's better than yours, right? Separation. That's what it does. It separates. There's me and there's God. There's subject and there's object. Is that real? No. We can't possibly be separate from nature. That's not possible, either figuratively or literally. We are not separate. We are not independent of each other. So what life and will is the third step talking about? The inventory. The end result of living a life with seeming power. Resentment, fears, and broken sexual relationships. This is what I bring to you. Here's my broken life. And I make a list of it. And on the fifth step, I share it with somebody. And this God, I share it. I say, here's my stuff. I'm pooped. You take it. Now, I think I'm angry. I don't know that I have fear. So my fear list was minimal. I got some help from the sponsor about identifying the reason I'm raging and yelling and screaming is I'm scared to death. And I don't know that. I can't see that. But it starts to glimpse behind the shade now. I can see it a little bit maybe because you've taken away my medication. Everything's very raw. And what's the big lesson that we learn in the inventory? One of the big lessons, I think the big lesson that we learn in the inventory is the second pillar of spiritual condition. I have to stop blaming other people and institutions for my problems. High school is over. The problem that you and I have in sobriety is that we are emotionally immature. The professional community, Tebow and the Tebow papers called the alcoholics king baby. King baby. And we hear that and we go, no, I have special thinking. I have alcoholic thinking and it's never going away. And you need to consider that when you're dealing with me. You ever heard somebody that's like 20 or 30 years sober stand up at a podium and say, never tell an alcoholic what to do. We don't like to be told what to do. You tell us what to do and we'll just do the exact opposite. Never tell an alcoholic what to do. Now, when you're 14 or 15 years old, that can be cute and maybe even appropriate. When you're 40, it's just stupid, right? That's not neuroses. That's emotional immaturity. That's all that is. I don't think we have special thinking. We're just immature. I got here at 37, and on a good day, I had the emotional development of a 16-year-old, and this kid was not an honor student. He's not the one that's mature beyond his years. He's the one with a bit of a problem with authority. On my resentment list, I had the entire federal government, and specifically the Department of Motor Vehicles. Who are they to tell me I can drive or not? Go down and get a license. What the hell is this crap? You know, I'd scream at cops on the side of the machine. I've had myself arrested before for bad behavior. You know, you can't tell me what to do, you jackbooted Nazi. You know, just stuff, you know, anger, rage, that kind of stuff, you know. Teenager stuff. That's me, and I'm 6'5". I look like I'm grown up, but I'm not. I mean, I'm 8 or 9 years sober, coaching a soccer team full of 9-year-olds. I got thrown off the field for going after the referee for a bad call, right in front of my own children. You know, I've been thrown off a baseball field before too. You know, sober. So what's going to happen now that I walk in here? I'm going to have a series of experiences now that I'm not medicated that I'm going to learn from. You can't speed this process up. You have to live through it experientially. It's going to take a while. So the second pillar of spiritual condition is I have to stop the blaming. I can't blame you for my problems anymore. It doesn't work. If it's you, if you need to be different in order for me to be happy, there's no hope. There's no hope. I have to begin to own my own life. Doesn't mean that nothing happened to me, but I have to stop the blaming. Now, if you combine this powerlessness, you're starting to get this a little bit, and you're going to start learning how to stop blaming. It's not going to stop right away, but every time you do it, you're going to feel guilty about it now, because now you get it. It's been exposed, right? You got to stop this. You have to own your own life. You can't, you know, high school's over. If you combine those two things, you don't really have to make a list of your character defects. They will come and visit you with alarming regularity. And now that you're not blaming anymore and you realize your power, you're going to have to confront it now. You're going to have to deal with it now. This seems to be how it works in 6 and 7. You know, I become willing and I humbly ask for it to be removed, so it gets shown to me in such stark living color that I can't ignore it anymore. And I'm going to keep doing it, but now I'm going to have to start making amends for it. And, you know, it's going to be a slow process, but I will ultimately get over whatever it is that's blocking me. Whatever behavior that's causing me trouble will eventually go away. Then we get into 8 and 9. And 8 and 9 this is when the transformation begins. Because all these people I've been blaming for my problems, now you want me to go to them and make amends, and I do not want to do this. I'm afraid to do it. I don't think it's going to work, and it's stupid. I feel like an idiot. Nobody goes and does that stuff. When you start admitting that you're wrong, man, you've lost the game. You've lost the war. And I've been hanging on to it for a long time. I do not want to let go of this. This is just causing destruction to my personality. But I go do it anyway. Now, what happens in the 9th step? When I go to somebody that I don't ever want to see again, and I look them right in the eye and I make the amends, when I turn and walk away from that, I am changed right then and there. No waiting. It's called a catharsis. The action of doing that will change you as a person. It will change you. The experience of making the amends. This is where people really balk. You know, we all balk a little bit at the inventory, but the 9th step is a mother, boy. This is a hard one. And it took a while for me to do this. But this is when the transformation begins, because this thing is about transformation. Don't be fooled by this. Well, it's all about not drinking. That's certainly part of it, but it's about transformation, being changed from who you are to something else, being transformed. That happens here in Alcoholics Anonymous. Every day it happens. And what's the big lesson in the 9th step? This is a big one. Nothing is personal. No one was ever doing anything to me. They were just doing what they do, and I happen to be in the blast radius of it. And sometimes you're in my blast radius. This is an earth-shattering realization. If you realize the depth of your powerlessness, and you can't blame anybody anymore, that's been taken away from you. And when you start making the amends, you realize in this process doing this, that nobody was really doing anything to me. They were just doing what they do. Sometime in the past, I put myself in a position to be hurt. And I've blamed you all this time. I blamed my father. I blamed people. And when I made amends to some of these people, I realized they're just who they are. They were never focused on me. That's a stunner. That is the collapse of the alibi system. What happens when these 3 things come together is this egoic structure of who you think you are that first presented itself at 2.5 years old, it begins to crumble. It starts to fall apart. If nothing's personal, what am I defending? Isn't it true that your opinion of me says more about you than it does me? And I have no idea what your opinion of me is anyway. Why am I wasting so much time being worried about that? And my opinion of you says more about me than it does you. What am I defending? I've poured a lot of energy into this construct. This seems to happen between 8 and 12 years sober a lot. I had an mental and emotional collapse at around 9 or 10 years sober. You know, the structure of who I thought I was began to fall apart. I was doing this work and it was having an impact on me, and things began to change. How I felt about things began to change. And I really just kind of fell apart. And this is not an uncommon thing. Some people call it the second surrender. Well, wait till you get to the 3rd and the 4th one. They're really interesting, you know. 1 through 9 is about 10% of the program. It's not the work. It's the bare minimum. It's Sober 101. It's the first semester. It's what we have to do to prepare ourselves for the work. The real work in Alcoholics Anonymous is 10, 11, and 12. Those 3 steps are 90% of the program. It's where we live. It's the manifestation of the work that we've done. Faith without works is dead. Now starts the work. When you realize that nothing's personal and things begin to fall apart, this construct falls apart, then comes the fourth pillar of spiritual condition. Self-awareness as compared to self-obsession. Developing the skill of the watcher, being able to watch yourself move through life. What Alcoholics Anonymous will do, this spiritual path of AA, it will subtract from you everything that's within you that's blocking you from seeing that you already have everything you need. There was nothing ever missing. 10th step is about making amends in the present moment. Because now you know, now you can see. You pause when agitated or doubtful. You know, self-awareness doesn't necessarily mean the behavior changes, but you can see it now. It's the beginning of the end of whatever it is that's blocking you. You can see it now. You don't have to wait around, write 10 pages and go share it with 15 people. You get it. When you step on somebody's foot, you turn around and say you're sorry. This can be a bit of a slow and a painful process, but you develop the skill of the watcher. Combined with the 11th step that in meditation you can watch yourself think, right? This is a very real experience. This is blue collar. Anybody can do this stuff. This isn't airy-fairy, weird, abstract spiritual concepts. It's not about that. In meditation, you can focus on your breath. When you focus on your breath, you're in the present moment. You focus your mind on your breath. The little ego, the 2.5-year-old, he doesn't like being in the present moment. There's nothing for him to do, right? There's never anything wrong in the present moment. It wants to be in the future where it can worry about things, or in the past where it can mull over what should have happened. And you notice that it has wandered away from the breath and you gently bring it back. This is absolute conclusive proof, experientially, that who you are is not your thinking mind. If it was, you couldn't catch it. So whatever it is that's within you that can watch yourself think, maybe that's closer to the true self, the essence of your being. I think that's literally true. This is a game-changing experience. When this happens, this is game-changing. It says in our book that selfishness and self-centeredness is the root of my problem, right? Selfishness and self-centeredness exist within the ego. The ego is not the enemy. It's part of the human condition. But on a spiritual path, you're forced to look at it. So when you realize that you can watch it, you can see it do things. It wants to take you places and you don't necessarily have to go. You can finally stop working on yourself. You're just feeding the beast, right? This is what some like to call the false self. You try to change how you think. What you can do instead of changing how you think is just don't go where it's going to think. Just don't go there. Stay in the present moment. This is a real practical thing. This is a wonderful tool. My sponsor loves to say, you can't stay sober on 11.5 steps, right? And meditation became real serious to me, a real part of my life at around 20 years sober. I had played around with it before, but, you know, when the student's ready to teach, I started getting really sick. You know, I physically got really sick. I almost died a few years ago. So now what we have is self-awareness. We get powerlessness. We got to stop the blaming. We realize that nothing's personal. Nobody's doing anything to me. That's a big one. These things combined will create self-awareness. What's the final pillar? What's the big one? The 12th step. What's the 12th step all about? Why is it so important? It says our very lives depend upon our constant thought of others and how we may help meet their needs, right? It says that. It's my favorite line in the book. I think I know that page number. I believe it's page 22. Double check me. I try not to know page numbers. It creeps me out. So my sponsor gets me start sponsoring people when I'm a year sober. By the time I was a year sober, I was making amends. I start sponsoring people. And I've done that for 35 years. Now, the first 10 years I was doing that, I was trying to make a name for myself in an anonymous organization. I'm trying to claw my way up the AA corporate ladder. I'm looking for devotees, man. I'm going to create my own cult. I'm just absolutely full of myself. I'm motivated by self, totally. Do I know this content? No, I just don't know any other way. It's just the way I am. I don't want to be sitting in the room with the rest of you. I want to be the speaker, you know? I want to be the secretary of the meeting. I want to be in charge. I want to claw my way up the hierarchy, right? And this is what I'm doing. And you know, yeah, they say do something really nice for somebody and then don't tell anybody. I don't know that I've ever accomplished that. If I do something really good for somebody and you don't know about it, then it doesn't count. I want the score. I want the hash marks. I want the trophy. That's how I'm driven. That's who I am. And at 10 years sober, 9 or 10 years sober, all of this collapsed. It all fell apart. I had some stuff happen in my life. I ended up getting divorced. Everything fell apart. And so I was the phony biker with the clip-on earring, right? In Alcoholics Anonymous, I became the phony AA guru, right? You can do that. You can talk a good game, but not really be doing the stuff yourself. And if you say it with authority, people will believe you, you know? Now, did I know that I was totally full of shit? Not completely. I had glimpses of it. You know, you can sit and give a guy a 20-minute lecture on how he should live his life. Then he leaves the room and you think to yourself, boy, I should record that and give that to the rest of my sponsors. That's really good stuff. Then you think, maybe I should even do some of it. And I actually called my sponsor and I said, you know, Jay, I think I'm a hypocrite. And he goes, no, he says, Bill, you're a liar. It's worse than you think. It's like you're leading people to believe you're doing this stuff and you're not really doing it. You're just talking a good game. You're doing theater. You're playing a role. You know, why don't you get real like that? We had some real difficult conversations. My whole life fell apart and I ended up doing a big inventory. But you know what happened? Here's what happened. This is the final pillar of spiritual condition. Irrespective of what my motivation was, I was doing the stuff. I was reading the book with you. I was guiding you through inventories. I was helping you make amends. You invited me into your life, and I invited you into my life. I had one of these houses where all the sponsees are coming around. The kids are kicking the soccer ball up against the garage door as we're reading the book together. I'm going on 12-step calls. I've got commitments. I'm doing it. I'm doing the work. Irrespective of what my motivation was, what happened is I fell in love with you. Somewhere along the line, I fell in love. You changed me. You entered my heart. Now, if it's true what we're suffering from in sobriety is emotional immaturity, what's one of the flagships of emotional immaturity? Lack of compassion. And I'm focused on myself. I can't really feel you in my life. The only time I'm concerned about how you feel is when how you feel impacts me. You know, that's it. And I don't know that I don't have compassion. I've never had it. So how would I know that there's anything missing? The character defects are obvious, but what about the parts of me that never developed in those developing years when I was drinking and medicating? And what doesn't develop in all of us across the board is compassion. Some are worse than others. Some of us are sociopathic. We don't feel anything. But somewhere in that, I fell in love with you. And in doing that, it changed my life. Compassion is the keystone of spiritual condition. Isn't it what you and I felt when we walked into AA? Isn't that what we felt? Didn't some of us sit and think, I wonder what they're after? Why are they doing all this? They don't really care. It's all a facade because it's uncomfortable for us. You know, we don't know anything about intimacy. I can't feel the other person in my life. I think sex is intimacy. And it could be the celebration of intimacy, but it certainly isn't intimacy. In and of itself, it's just fun, but it's not intimacy. We don't know how to do intimacy. We have trouble with personal relationships because we don't feel the other person. We're not sensitive. We're touchy. There's a difference. And you changed me. You and I are in a program where people's lives are saved every day in AA. Every day people's lives are saved. And the mechanism that's used for that is us. We say the words. We drive the car. We make the phone calls. We give them some money sometimes. We help them find a job. We do a lot for people. If we don't do this sponsoring thing, if we don't get into this aspect of the problem, my sense is we never really learn that compassion. We're afraid of that one-on-one kind of sponsorship. It's a very intimate act. We don't know how to behave. I learned a lot of lessons in sponsoring you one-on-one. I had to learn how to listen and not just wait for you to stop talking. You want to confront your character defects, sponsor people. You'll run into every one of them. You'll have to confront each one of them. Every time a new guy comes to me, I always thought for years that I was the teacher and you're the student. And then you realize after a while how stupid is that. They have always been the teacher. That's how transformation happens, as you enter my life. Any of the great saints, when they come out of their cave, what do? They walk down into the village and they start teaching the children. They're trying to talk to us. They're trying to sponsor us, trying to tell us what we've discovered. Isn't that what we do for each other? I know I've run out of time here, and I want to leave you with this. We have these 5 pillars of sobriety, 5 pillars of spiritual condition. Powerlessness, stop the blaming, nothing is personal, self-awareness, and above all, compassion. People will tell you around here that you have to give it away to keep it. I don't believe that at all. I don't think that's even true. I think you have to give it away to even get it. That's how you get the it that you're looking for. It's not just about not drinking at all. That's just the vehicle that got us here. This is about transformation. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bill. Appreciate it. Now Eric is going to read the promise.